a good way to begin to say that we hope and pray that the work we're doing brings healing to ourselves and also to our whole community and also to all the souls we're connected to. So our loved ones, our people, and the whole world. So thank you, Hana Bracha, for reminding us of that. I'm going to say the traditional blessing, the Bracha Shechianu, and you're welcome to say it with me or say Amen after or say your own version of the blessing. To give thanks for this very moving moment. We're in this opportunity to begin another year of learning and practice together for some of us, the first one in this constellation. And it's only another year of our lives for all of us that we're going through, and hopefully a year of tremendous blessing and growth and learning and healing. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam She'echianu K'imanu V'Higanu Lazman Hazeh. And thank you to the Source of Life for bringing us to this moment, making it possible for us to be together and hopefully learning so much from each other and with each other as we go. And a very warm welcome to all of you who I'm looking at right now, the beautiful faces in boxes on my screen, but also everyone joining via the recording. You're also so welcome. We're thinking of you as well. There'll be some folks who will be participating that way. And we will begin in a moment. I'll share my screen and we'll start learning about the month of Elul. I'll just say one thing about it that's not early on the sheet. It's on the sheet somewhere near the end, but I think it deserves to be mentioned before we even start looking at text. It's something some of you may have heard before about Elul that I feel is a really important framing for everything we're going to talk about, which is our mystics tell us that the name of the month we're going into Elul is an acronym, meaning the letters Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, Elul, are an acronym for a verse from the Song of Songs. Ani ledodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. And this reciprocal flow of love is really seen by our mystics as being the defining characteristic of the whole month, of all the work we're going to talk about of the month, of teshuvah, of returning to ourselves, returning to our source, returning to our higher, best possible self. It's all within this very beautiful framework. And we've actually already started moving towards that energy of reciprocal love in our calendar. We already have had, approximately a week ago, we had something called Tu B'Av, that some of you may have known about, and some of you may have not, because it's not so well known. Tu B'Av is a love festival. It happens on the full moon before Elul. So we just had it a week ago, as I said, and that we're kind of infused with that energy of reciprocal loving relationship with life. And one of the ideas the mystics teach us about Tu B'Av is that that's when the Creator says, yes, I want to create the world again for another year. It's 6 weeks before Rosh Hashanah Tu B'Av, and it's when the Creator says, I want there to be life. I want life to continue, and I'm going to invest from my side in that. So we're riding that wave now of going into the new year with that loving affirmation that we hope to tap into. So let's I'll share my screen as I said, and we'll start looking at some of the sources on the sheet and discussing them, and then we'll see their practices to do based on them. I hope everyone can see the sheet. The sharing worked. Great, thank you. So our very first source is from Sefer Yetzirah, a very old Kabbalistic source or proto-Kabbalistic. It's so old that it's before what some people consider to be Kabbalah. It's certainly the oldest text we have of Jewish mysticism, if we don't count the Bible itself, the Tanakh or the Torah. And it's quite mysterious and quite poetic and can be read as akin to a book of magic spells in a way, somewhere between poetry and magic. But of course, very specific kind of magic, a mystical Jewish magic. And for every month, it gives characteristics. It says every month of our calendar has a certain letter associated with it, certain human faculty associated with it, and a certain constellation, which lines up with what we call Western astrology also. So it says here about our month of Elul, he, meaning the creator, made the letter Yud king over action. So Yud is the letter of our month, Yud, and action, Ma'aseh, doing, that is the human faculty of our month, as opposed to other months which are sleeping or eating or looking or hearing, so many different things. but action, specifically being active in the world, Ma'aseh, doing things in the world, is our month. And he bound a crown to it, it says, and he combined one with another. And with them, he formed Virgo in the universe. So Virgo, that's the constellation of our month. We're going to see a teaching about that in a moment. Elul in the year, that's the name of the month itself, Elul, and the left hand in the soul, male and female. So Sefer Yetzirah, in its own fairly mysterious, mystical way, it shows how everything maps onto the dimensions of space, time, and being, or human being specifically, because the Kabbalists, the mystics, hold that we are a microcosm of the universe. So when it says the left hand of the soul, it's saying that we should pay attention to our physical left hand this month, but also that there's something in the metaphorical left hand of the entire universe, something that I don't claim to understand exactly what that means or how to work this out, that also aligns with the constellation and the letter and the faculty of the month also. So we're going to focus on the constellation for a moment, because what we have next is a very beautiful Hasidic teaching from Bnei Yissaschar, a great Hasidic master. So we've skipped forward many centuries from probably roughly the 2nd or 5th century, somewhere like that for Sefer Yetzirah. We've skipped forward now to the 18th century, to the early 19th even, for the Bnei Yissaschar. He's a Hasidic master writing in Hungary, and he does something very special. And in this course, as we go through the months, we're going to come back to him a lot, because his book, most Hasidic books, are structured on the weekly Torah portion. It says, what does it say about this Torah portion, and so on and so on. It goes week by week. But his book specifically goes month by month, telling us all the things that we need to work on in each month. So he doesn't really talk about the weekly Torah portions except in passing, incidentally. It's really focused on what we're focused on in this course, the calendar and how to work with it for healing and growth. So he tells us something. He says, Elul, the month we're going into, is especially suitable for teshuvah. This word we're going to use a lot, and I'm going to translate it as return to our source and our higher self. Teshuvah literally means return or response, but that when it's used, that's really what it means. The judgments or severities of Tammuz and Av are sweetened in Elul. So Tammuz is the previous month before the one we're in now, and Av is our current month. And Tammuz and Av are challenging times in our calendar, with a month where a lot of very severe, challenging things have happened to our people over the generations. And this is not coincidental for our mystics. This is the time, Tammuz and Av are a time of a spiritual challenge. As I mentioned actually before I shared my screen though, in Av, we've actually already moved into the easier bit of Av. Now we're in the home stretch of Av. It's actually, a time of rachamim, a time of compassion, not as challenging as the beginning of the month. So the judgments of or severities of Tammuz and Av are sweetened in Elul. And now he's going to relate this to Sefer Yetzirah that we just saw. He quotes it. He says, he formed in it Virgo. Now the Hebrew word for Virgo is virgin, Betula. So virgin Virgo in the universe. So that's the quote from Sefer Yetzirah. Now he's going to tell us about it, what it means for us in terms of our work. He says, the Jewish people are always like a virgin who have never been dominated by any man. They are as dear to their beloved as it were, every time, just like the first time. Carrying on over the page, he says, and the constellation of this month, which is especially suitable for Teshuvah, this return, is Virgo, because through Teshuvah, we become like new creations, as if we have never been ruled over by the evil impulse. The evil impulse you could also translate as our destructive tendencies, meaning the thoughts and desires that everybody has, which do not serve us or serve life. We all have many different thoughts and desires all the time, of course. So the Yetzer Hara, the evil impulse or destructive tendencies, that's what the rabbis call those parts of ourselves which, if we do listen to them, which we all do sometimes, we tend to regret it. They tend not to lead us in a good direction. So just to repeat the main idea here, the constellation of our month is Virgo or Virgin, Betula. And this is especially suitable for Teshuvah because through Teshuvah, we become like new creations, as if we have never been ruled over by the evil impulse. In other words, as I said, we know we all have made mistakes. That's part of being human. But there's something about Teshuvah that allows us to access a real kind of purity and renewal, a real beginning again. That's a very, very important part of it. In Hebrew, we might say hitchadshut, beginning again, a renewal. Which, by the way, the root of that chadash relates to chodesh, month. So every month we actually have this opportunity for that renewal, but especially as we go into the final month of the year, that's going to take us into the new year, there's an extra special, extra deep opportunity of renewal with the new year. So we become like new creations, and that by the way is something to bear in mind throughout all the different steps of teshuvah that we're doing, because so often we come up against voices in ourselves or maybe obstacles in the world which say, well, you can't really make teshuvah for that, or well, some things you just can't fix, or and so on and so on. And of course, there's always true things in life that you can't always repair the exact physical, literal thing that we may have broken. But nonetheless, our mystics insist that there's a deeper fixing that we can perform. That even if the literal glass that I dropped cannot be put back together, or the relationship or the life or whatever it is, there's a deeper fixing that can happen. And that's something our teachers really insist on, and insist on imparting to us and asking us to really try and hold our lives in the light of. We have a complimentary teaching here from not a Hasidic Rebbe, actually someone from the line of Rebbes who was an opponent to the Hasidic movement, Reb Chaim of Volozhin. And he wrote this beautiful book, the Nefesh HaChaim, the Living Soul. And it was actually in many ways a counterpoint to Hasidic texts, but it's actually very complementary and very similar in a lot of ways. So he says something beautifully similar in his own way. He says, the soul is never contaminated at all, for its source is from the realm that is protected from foreign contact. The soul is always connected to its root, like two lovers who could never be separated, such that human actions can never damage it. So just to repeat and review that, he's saying our soul is never contaminated, and our soul is always connected to its root, meaning the divine. The mystics understand that our soul is actually a piece of the infinite divine, the Ein Sof. So we might do all kinds of things in this world, but there's some part of us which is always pure and always connected to that perfect source. As he says, if a person sins with a thought that is not good, God forbid, they cause harm only to themselves by causing sparks of the light of the soul to be removed and hidden from them. But the soul is never contaminated, God forbid. So this reflects an idea we actually see in our liturgy. In the morning liturgy, there's a prayer we say, and we say, God, I've woken up. God, I've woken up, and we say, one of the first things we say is, in the traditional liturgy, thank you for my soul, which is pure. Suggesting again, there's this part of us, all the things that we've all done, which we would rather we hadn't done, which may have affected us negatively, didn't affect this part of us. So it's very, very important, beautiful idea that there's some part of us that retains connection to who we really want to be and how we really want to be in the world. And this idea is expressed very beautifully in this teaching. And those of you who have learned with me before, this is a teaching we've probably done together, some of you more than once, because it's a very, very central, important, not only teaching, but practice. And we're going to read the teaching and then do the practice based on it. This is from Rabbi Nachman at Breslov. It's one of his most famous and celebrated teachings. It's called the Azamra Torah. Azamra is the name of the verse that he quotes at the beginning of it. It means I will sing. And it's about really focusing our energy hard on the goodness in ourselves and in others. And he says, and we'll read it in a moment in his words, he says it's a practice we have to dedicate ourselves to and rededicate ourselves to over and over again, because there's constant resistance. There's constant layers of cynicism and depression and so many other things that make it hard for us to really appreciate the goodness in ourselves and others. So here, now I'll read it in his words. And after this, it's a long-ish source. We'll read the source and we'll come back together. We'll discuss, we'll share. People will share what's coming up for you and any questions and insights, and then we'll do the practice. So Rabbi Nachman says, know that you must judge all people favorably. That's actually an idea taken from our early rabbis and Ethics of the Fathers. Know that you must judge all people favorably. This applies even to the worst of people. You must search until you find some little bit of good in them. In that good place inside them, they are not evil. You can just find this little bit of good and judge them favorably. You really can elevate them to the side of merit, and they will be able to return into teshuvah to their best selves. Maybe they are an evil person, Even so, is it really possible that they are totally devoid of even the slightest modicum of good? How could it be that all their life they never once did anything good? By finding one tiny good point in which they are not evil and thereby judging them favorably, you really do raise them from being guilty to having merit, until through this they return to their best selves and to the divine in teshuvah. This is the meaning of the verse, just a little more, then there is no sinner. Meaning, if we do this work a little more, a little more, a little more of trying to see the good and appreciate the good, there's no sinner there anymore. There's no evil person there anymore. Because instead, where the evil person was, somebody else now is. I want to say two things about this chunk before we move on. I'm sure that some of you, especially if you're seeing this teaching for the first time, but even if you're not, you may be thinking, really? I have to try and see the good in evil, wicked people? What about people that do terrible things in the world? I'm sure we all have our list of people we think are absolutely awful, right? You don't need to go through the list now. How could Rabbi Nachman be expecting me, and why is it good to try and see the good in them? You might be asking. It's a great question. So one of our other mystics, the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero, an earlier Kabbalist from Tzfat in Israel, he says when we're doing the work of forgiving people and it's hard, he suggests imagining that person as a baby or as a tiny infant, perhaps even milking, nursing from their mother. And he says, if you remember that everybody at some point was that perfect and that innocent and that vulnerable, then maybe you can realize there's a place in that person, as there is in everyone, including ourselves, which really is like that. And it's not about forgetting everything else. It's not about denying or discounting everything else, but just to also bear in mind that is also part of the truth, right? It's a piece of the truth that is very hard to hold on to sometimes, but it's also a piece of the truth. One other thing I want to point out about what we just read is Rabbi Nachman doesn't say, if we do this work of trying to see and appreciate the good in people, then it will change how we feel about people. He's taking that for granted. Of course it will. He says it actually changes who they are. It changes them. And that is something that is very hard to prove in a laboratory, right? I can't prove it from scientifically tested research, but I've seen it over and over again in my life. That when we do this work, it changes reality and ripples out. The work we do ripples out in ways that we can't control and we can't even imagine in advance, but it happens. So this work can be very transformative. Carrying on, now maybe to the bit that's even harder for some of us. You must also, he says, find the good in yourself. It is known that a person must take care to always be joyful and to distance himself very, very far from depression. He's talking about a specific kind of depression. He talks about it a lot in his teachings, where we get into a spiral of negative thinking, negative self-judgment, negative self-criticism, where we just berate ourselves and go round and round, down and down, and God forbid, in that spiral. He's very adamant, as he says here, not to even go near it. Stay far away from it and use joy as a tool to access joy, to keep away from it. He says in other teachings that we have to access joy any way we can, even with silly jokes and silly dances and silly stories, just to keep ourselves in a healthy state of mental health, to keep away from the danger of depressing self-criticism. Carrying on, he says, when you start looking deep inside yourself, you may think you have no good in you at all. You may feel you are full of mistakes, and the negative voice inside you tries to make you fall into a bitter and black despair, God forbid. Search until you find some little good in you. How could it be that you never did anything good in your whole life? When you start examining your good deed, you may see that it had many flaws and it is not pure. So if you try and think of something good you did, when we're in that hard place, which I'm sure many, if not all of us, have been in at some point, of self-judgment in a negative way, it's very easy to say, oh, I never did anything good. And if I think of something that did seem to be good, I did it for the wrong reasons, or I didn't do it that well, etc., etc. However, he says, carrying on, he says, even so, how could it be that your mitzvah, your sacred ritual, or your good deed contains no good at all? It absolutely must be that any mitzvah or good deed that anyone does must contain some good point. You must search and search until you find some small good point inside yourself to enliven yourself and make yourself joyful. Through searching and finding even just that little bit of goodness in yourself, you truly move from being guilty to having merit. Through this, you will be able to return into teshuvah, as in, and again, he quotes the same verse he quoted above, just a little more, then there is no sinner. When you think about his place, he won't be there. So again, he makes the claim, it's not just that we will feel different, we will actually change who we are through this work. Because the goodness that's in us, he insists is there. The only question is, it's like a seed. Are we watering it with our attention? Are we letting it grow? Are we letting it be more and more alive and more a part of us? Right? It's there. What are we doing with it? He says, search for and gather good points in others and ourselves, and through this, melodies are made. We're going to end there. It's a longer teaching. This is just part of, but just to give over a tiny bit of the idea that he goes on to say, he says, the music of our lives is made up of these good points that we have to struggle sometimes to see and appreciate in ourselves and others. And every time we appreciate something good about ourselves or about others, it's like a note in the music of life. And it's like, this is the melody. He says, this is how melodies are made. This is how the melody that we want to be singing through our lives is made. And of course, if we're not focusing on the good, then we're focusing on other things, then the melody will come out very differently. So he says, if we really want to pray and help others pray and be someone who leads prayer, this is an essential part of what it means to be a leader of prayer, is to be somebody who can see and appreciate the goodness in ourselves and others and make this beautiful melody of the good points, just like the notes of music are these dots. So let's come back together. I'll just say the next source we're not going to read. There's a little bit of stuff on the sheet we won't have time for, even in the early sections. But this is a source from Rav Kook, great mystic of the 20th century, where he says something complimentary, but we're not going to read it. If it's for you to enjoy in your own time if you'd like to. Let's hear if anyone has any clarifying questions or anything that comes up for you from this, and then we'll do the practice. Rena, please.
Hi, good to see you.
Hi.
The source that talks about the soul is always protected from human action do we think of this in terms of the 5 levels of the soul, and maybe that's the Chaya and Yehida versus the Neshama or the Nefesh?
That's a great question. So if I'll share my screen again, because I think this deserves us going back to that source. So let's go back to the Nefesh HaChaim. Here we go. So he here in the Hebrew is using word neshama. I'm highlighting it there. And as you're asking, Rena, the rabbis do say there are 5 levels of soul, and neshama is the third. It's in the middle of the 5, but it's actually the highest that we can access in our embodied experience in this life. The other two that you mentioned, Chaya and Yechida, the mystics teach, let's come back together. The mystics teach those are essentially outside of our usual embodied experience. We can access them through what we call spiritual elevation, or some kind of expansion of our consciousness, but they're not inside this physical form as the mystics understand it. So neshama is as high as it really gets in terms of our embodied being, in terms of my individual self. And so I think you're correct to say that he's working within that framework. He's saying, the highest level of our soul that we carry around with us, as it were, is untouchable. Rena, is that helpful?
Yes, and it doesn't fit with my understanding of the Neshama, which carries all the past life information and very much is touched by human experience.
Great. Good question also. Right. Yeah, I don't think he's claiming it's totally isolated in every way, but I think his claim is, even though it is part of us, I think it's very clear from other sources and even from him in other places, it is part of us. And so it does contain so much of who we are. It's identified with our psyche, our thoughts, and many other parts of us. But he's saying there's something about it that is incorruptible. There's something about it that isn't tainted, which is an interesting claim. I again don't know how to test it in a laboratory, but he wants to make that claim about what it means to be us. That something about our personality, our psyche, has that incorruptibility. Thank you. Let's hear from the other folks who raised hands. I'll just say there are 4 more, I think, if I'm seeing correctly already, and so that will probably be good for this section of sharing, so we can move to the practice. So Tova, please.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes good to say if something like this has actually worked in your life. And there was a period in which I was involved in these self-development seminars, that people go to. And we went through and I had a very problematic relationship with my mother for a lot of reasons. And we went through an exercise, like you do these exercises, and somehow came into my conscious seeing her as a little girl. And it changed my relationship with her because I saw how her wounded childhood had made her react in certain ways. And I really forgave her. It changed everything. And I don't know that and it was one of these personal development seminars. It's sort of like meditation and maybe some stuff we do, but it can happen. And it really worked in my life. And right now it's making me very emotional thinking of that whole experience. It's
Totally.
possible.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Becky, please.
Well, hello. My sharing is sort of whimsical, I guess, but I'll try to afterwards I try to make it a little more meaningful, which is that when I get into a sense of everything is very negative and just that sense of what is all this world, it's so bad. The one thing I've always consistently been able to find goodness in is music, especially live music, people playing music. But so that's just my introduction to the thought that I had as we were going through this. We had the section of Jewish people are like a virgin. And when I entered into this class, I was thinking, I don't really know anything about Kabbalah, except Madonna was really into it in the 90s. So I was like, oh, that's, related to obviously her study of Torah. Well, I'd never had heard of that coming from Jewish ideas of like a virgin. And then we came to the point of the melodies being made and the music of it, how music is this connection of goodness. So that resonated with me. And then finally, the verse of enliven yourself and lively up yourself and reggae and Bob Marley all came together. So that was my thought.
I love that, Becky. Thank you. Yeah, I never thought of like a virgin Kabbalistically, but I'll take it. And yeah, and by the way, Bob Marley was very influenced by a lot of serious Jewish influences. There's a lot there to talk about. Thank you very much. Sandy, please.
I have a hard question. Is there any chance that the soul could be compromised?
It's a good question. Reb Chaim here, who's, drawing on his lineage of Kabbalah that's been passed down for many generations to him, this really is a work of principles. His book, it's not his original innovations. He's saying no. He's insisting there's somehow, and this goes back to Rena's question too, even though our soul is in a reciprocal relationship with who we are and what we do and what happens to us, somehow in some respect, there's a kind of purity and incorruptibility that it has, that is kind of like, I think of it a bit like a bank vault, the safe that like no one can break into. There's like this little piece of us that is protected. And I think the idea here is when I mentioned before the idea of renewal, hitchadshut, that like teshuva is a lot about starting over again as a new creation. I think the idea here is we've all done so many things that we regret, or when we feel like that, how can we start again when we're so full of blame and guilt and shame and all these things, knowing that we messed up? And I think the claim here is there's a place in us that doesn't need to feel that way. There's a place we can start that actually has genuine divine perfection. We all have that divine perfection within us, even if you're having a rough day, week, month, year. And that. So no, I'm going to say, Sandy, according to the tradition that he's bringing, we all have that divine perfection no matter what. That's the claim.
For everybody in the world.
That's the claim. Yeah.
So when we see a person doing cruel things to other people, somewhere, somehow, there's in their heart somewhere inside their soul.
I'm so sorry.
There's some other, yeah.
Yeah, it's the noise. I'm trying to work out where it's coming from. Here, I'll mute everyone and then you unmute yourself, Sandy. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Sandy, please unmute again and go again.
um, when you see people doing cruel things to other people for almost no reason at all, somewhere deep under layers and layers and layers, they have the spark of God inside of them.
I
That's
mean,
what you're trying to say, right?
yeah, absolutely. That's it. It goes back to the Torah saying everyone's made in the image of God, but B'Tselem Elohim. Absolutely, right? It goes all the way back. And of course, the question is, it's up to us. Like, are we listening to it? Are we trying to get in touch with it and live according to it? That's our work, right? But is that divine perfection there in everyone? Yeah, Genesis chapter 1. That's the claim. And that is revolutionary. That is something that we might take for granted because it's in chapter 1 of our first book of our first chapter of our first book. But that's a revolution that we brought to the world. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Hina, please.
Hi, good to
Hi.
be here. I've thought about this question about the purity of the neshama quite a bit. And one of the things that has helped me to wrestle with, wait a minute, what about these horrible people kind of thing, is that if I think of neshama as consciousness, because it is correlated to the mind. So if I think of it as consciousness itself, rather than something over which I have, well, if I think of it as consciousness, then everything is included in it. Because from the non-dual perspective, consciousness is what everything is made of. Everything is contained in consciousness. And everything is recognized or known by consciousness, which means that the reason, even though everybody is part of neshama and is therefore pure, they, if they don't know about it, they don't know their own consciousness and that everything is included in consciousness, then they act in accordance with their lower inclinations, the stuff that doesn't really change consciousness, but it affects the behavior and it affects the emotions, that the soul levels beneath neshama, the emotional and the physical. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me, it makes a lot of sense. To me, I feel like you just put in, the language of consciousness, which is a very helpful language for some of us. You put in that language, a statement the rabbis say that our soul is a piece of the divine from above, meaning that like it's made of the same stuff. We just have a piece of the infinite divine inside us. And if you want to call it consciousness, it's great. I think it's a very helpful word. And then like you said, it therefore connects and flows, right, one to the other. And the question again, like you said, is, are we conscious of it, right? Are we tapping into it? Are we listening to it? Are we in relationship with it? Or, as you said, are we just, obeying the drives and desires that arise from our lower self, which we also have? Thank you. I want to move to practice. Michelle, you have something to share? If it's quick, you may.
Thanks, Daniel. Good morning. Glad to be with you and everybody else. I can get that we're born with a pure soul. At that moment, I had the privilege of seeing my daughter born because she was adopted, and it's a soul moment. And that might be for everyone, but people get damaged. People are put outside the community. I mean, there is evil. The fact that they were born with a pure soul doesn't mean that they're not evil and need to be put outside of the community, perhaps. Devarte.
Shmarti, great question. So there's a classic work of halakha, of Jewish law and practice about teshuvah by Maimonides, great medieval philosopher and rabbi, and he codifies, how does this work? And he lists many people who actually are put outside the community and can potentially lose the ability to easily at least make teshuvah. But nonetheless, the general principle that he insists on is teshuvah works for everybody. Meaning, as long as you're alive, if you're a human being, even if you've done the things that he considers to be completely beyond the pale of, putting yourself outside the community in all these terrible ways, he nonetheless insists Teshuvah is something that works as long as we're alive and we're a human being, because we have this innate human perfection. Again, he does say, actually, and this relates to your question, we might make it harder and harder for ourselves. The more layers of woundedness and damage and cruelty, whatever it is that we put on top, the harder it is and the less likely it is that we access it. So that's the real dynamic. But the claim of the tradition is it's there in everyone. And, as far as I know, it's very likely that none of these beautiful faces that I'm looking at on my screen right now are guilty of the terrible, terrible, terrible things that we're thinking about. As far as I know, we all have reason not to judge ourselves so harshly, and to give ourselves a break, and to do this practice. This practice that we're about to do is about, right? Rabbi Menachem says, is remembering, we actually have this divine perfection within us. So I'm gonna move to that practice now. Make sure we get through what we need to today. It's a meditative practice. I'm going to ask you to make yourself comfortable for about 5 to 10 minutes of practice. If that's sitting in your current position, that's great. If you want to change your position, that's fine. Please keep your camera on or turn your camera off, whatever is comfortable for you as we do that. And when you're ready, let's bring our attention inside ourselves. You might want to take some deep breaths or lift up your shoulders and let them drop, whatever is helpful for you to let your body relax a little bit as you begin to bring your attention within. Gonna mute everyone for the recording. So we're gonna see if there's anything we want to pay attention to inside, and whatever we notice inside, I'm gonna try and bring compassion and friendliness to it. Might be physical sensations or emotions or thoughts, whatever's there when we close our eyes and put our attention on what's going on. This is the first step, just seeing if we can be as friendly and compassionate as possible to whatever we notice. And we're going to choose an anchor for our practice. It's an object that we can bring our awareness to that's safe for us to do that. So it's kind of like a home base for our attention throughout the practice, a safe home base. So you might want to choose a safe place in your body. It's a place in your body that doesn't bring you a lot of pain or resistance or trauma. Or if the body is not so good for you, you might want to use a mantra, a visualization, perhaps your sense of hearing and what you can hear. If you have something you use regularly, that's great, just to go with what works for you. If you're not sure, then choose one thing that sounds like it might be a good idea for you from that list I mentioned. And let's try and stick with this as our home base for the next couple of minutes, which means keeping our attention there as much as we can, moment by moment, noticing whatever's going on with that object we've chosen, place in the body or whatever you chose. What's happening with it? Naturally, our attention wanders sometimes, which is absolutely fine. It's just part of the practice. It's why we practice. We just gently bring it back, gently but diligently. This is the magic. This is how the practice works when we bring our attention back to the object we've chosen over and over again. I'm going to ask you to think of something that you did that expressed a good part of you, a part of you that you're glad exists. So it might be something you did that was kind or creative or wise or compassionate. It might be something you did for yourself, with yourself, to yourself, or maybe with other people. It might have been something in person or online. Doesn't matter. I'm going to ask you just to really see yourself in that moment. See if you can really imagine and feel that moment as much as possible with as many of your senses as possible. You doing something good, whatever it was. Really see if you can feel what you felt then. What was your inner experience doing this good deed, this good thing you did? Rabbi Nachman says in that teaching we just saw that when we try to do this, sometimes there may be resistance. There may be voices which tell us, internal voices which say, it wasn't such a good thing, we did it for the wrong reasons, we didn't do it so well, etc., etc. And that's fine. That's part of the practice. That's why we practice. We're going to smile and say, ah, Rabbi Nachman warned me. He was right. That's exactly what it means to be a human being and all these different parts of ourselves. That's fine. That's just part of the game. But he says what we have to do is try and strive diligently to get past that resistance by focusing on the goodness. So if you like, you can imagine there's a kernel of beautiful golden shining light. However you want to imagine it, it's great too. This beautiful golden shining light is like the core of your good deed. This goodness which motivates you to do all the good things you do. You might want to think of it as divinity or love, whatever works for you. See if we can really focus on that goodness. Maybe see it in our mind's eye or feel it in our bodies. Give it as much of our attention as we can. And as always throughout this practice and others will do together, we have that safe home base, that place in our bodies or the object we chose at the start. We can go back there and start again whenever we need to or want to. If you feel lost or overwhelmed, that's what the home base is for. Just go back when we're ready, start over. Starting over whenever we need to. Giving as much of our attention as we can to that beautiful golden, divine, loving light inside us and motivates all the good things we do. And noticing any resistance that comes up, any clouds around the light, seeing if we can really just keep focusing on the light as much as possible, letting the light grow and expand, shine brighter and brighter. See if we can let the clouds of resistance fall away. This beautiful goodness, this divine love is the truth of who we are. This is the claim of our teachers, of our tradition, of the Torah, saying we're created in the image of God. We have this within us. What happens when we focus on it? Give it this space, this nourishment. Gradually bring this round of practice to a close. Slowly come back together in your own time. Feel free to let your body move in any way you want to. Breathe, yawn, sigh, any way you want to. And let's rejoin each other gradually. So we can make a little bit of time now if anything strong came up for anyone that they feel moved to share. Maybe we can hear from 3 or so people and we can learn from each other's experience and insights. And then we'll move on to the next section. Stephen, please. Steve, Shimon.
Yeah, hi. I just have one quick question. For years, I've been practicing based on something I read in Sefer Haredim of Shekhinah's light being a rich blue, like the base of a candle flame. So I've always pictured that inner flame as blue. Was there a particular source for the gold, or is that just something you chose, or is there something about the color, I guess is the question.
Thanks for asking. I think it came to me in the moment actually from my own personal experience. So I'm familiar with the idea that Shekhinah is blue, and that's something I haven't practiced with in this way, in the same way, but I would love to, and it could be very beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. Maybe that could be something we could also try. Thanks. Sharon, please.
Thank you. So I had this experience of I saw a door opening. And I felt I had this experience that my soul was being it was like my soul wasn't separate just in my body. God was my charging station. That's what it felt like. And there was, even though I felt at rest, I felt like my tensions or something, God was working on me, like taking my tensions away or something like that. And that's why I was wondering what happens when you sleep and you wake up feeling anew, like we said at the beginning. It's like, I just figured, is God working? My soul isn't sleeping. Is God working on my soul? Not working, but helping me while I'm sleeping. So anyways, it was nice. Let me just say that it was very nice, very relaxing experience for me. Thank you.
Sharon, thank you. I'll say a couple of things. So first of all, yeah, I loved how you put it. God is our charging station. I think that's a beautiful way of saying, and like in the language of our rabbis, our soul is a piece of the divine. Like there's a connection there, right? So so really that works very well. And in terms of when we sleep, yeah, we say before we go to sleep in the traditional liturgy, God, I'm entrusting my soul to you, and please hold it with care and give it back to me in the morning. And so, yeah, presumably our soul is in a good place, during that time. So that's what we say in the prayers. So thank you. Chana bracha, please.
So this was a beautiful experience of all the inner barriers dissolving. it was what came to me was the incredible lightness of being light in both senses, that it was suffused with light, and I felt light. I felt bodiless. Um, it was, yeah, it just felt like that it was natural, that all the artificial barriers of physical stuff didn't really mean that much. It was very wonderful. And a little addendum, excuse me, to this. I keep thinking of how this teaching is the foundation of the teaching about the falling down 7 times, who merits, who is more meritorious, is not the person who never makes a mistake, but the person who falls down and picks themselves up 7 times. I multiply that by hundreds of times. But isn't that the basis of the fact of the Holy Soul?
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Chana bracha, 100%. First of all, thank you for your beautiful description of the practice. And yeah, you're exactly right, completely. In fact, Rabbi Nachman himself, who gave us this teaching and this practice, he talks about that a lot. He even says, I, meaning Rabbi Nachman himself, he says, I have to start over, he says, hundreds of times every day. And that's just how it is. That's the human condition. And if we're really honest with ourselves and really self-aware about what's going on inside us, sometimes that is our condition. That's really being real. So yeah, thank you for putting that together. There's actually the quote you mentioned from Proverbs: a righteous person falls 7 times but picks himself up, whereas a wicked person is just lost 1 time, they trip and they fall, and that's it. That's a quote from Proverbs that is near the end of the sheet. And there's in the concluding section of the sheet, which we won't get to today. It's just there for people to work through in your own time if you want to. It's really about perseverance. It's really about how teshuva requires this great sense of being okay with being human, and just knowing, like, we're not going to get it right in one go. No one's supposed to, and really being real with ourselves about that. So yeah, thank you, Chana bracha, for bringing us to that. It's very important. And one more person, then we'll go to the next section. Kathy, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I appreciate so much your continued emphasis on we're all doing the best we can, and it really, really touches my heart. Thank you. And of course that's what this teaching is about. And I had I got scammed yesterday, and I became very reactive, and I thought, gosh, I thought I was making some progress, how come I'm so reactive? And I said, okay, so what's important? What am I going to do here? And I just said, I did my morning prayers, and I said Misha Bera for my list is getting longer and longer, 40 some people. And I say, I did it with a pure heart, and I did it with, just as much kindness as I could, and unconditional love. And that, just that opportunity is so beautiful, and so transformative. That yes, I fell down, I picked myself up, and I also thought of it's like the tzaddik. With those attributes of the tzaddik, we aspire to, and we can aspire to that level. So thank you.
Kathy, thank you so much for sharing that. I really love your description of your practice. I'm saying those prayers in that way. It's beautiful and touching. And you're right, like that's the work. That's an opportunity. That's what we're here for. Thank you for that. I said that was the last person, but then I saw Talian. Talian, you're really the last person. Okay, please. Oh, wait, we can't hear you though. Please unmute.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
So I really related to your using the golden light for me, because I look at the golden light as a sense of consciousness, and throughout it, I was feeling that from I've been saying since before COVID, when I've been saying I'm consciously Jewish, and I was just smiling today because start off with talking about consciousness and the golden light, and I felt all that, and even though I'm having this terrible stomach ache at this for the last couple of hours, it's just like somehow it felt like that was my lowest self, where that is the physicality, and just given this golden light and this being in that state of Jewish consciousness really helped me greatly. So thank you.
I'm sorry you don't feel so good physically, but thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's powerful. I mean, I'm sure everyone can relate from your own experience that we've all experienced some version of what Talian just described in terms of, sometimes the physical self feels healthy, but we can affect it with our mind, with our consciousness, right? We can choose to feel worse and worse and worse, or we can like try and shift things from our mind sometimes, depending on obviously what's going on. Thank you. Okay, let's go forward. So that was the foundation, that was the beginning. It's a very, very important one of knowing the goodness within ourselves is always there, because of course, how we say teshuva, we don't put it some other way. Teshuva means, as I said, return to our higher self, return to our best self, return to our divine source. That implies that we have already been there, or we are already there in some way. So that's why we start there. I'll share my screen and we'll see the next step of the journey of teshuva. Oh yeah, I'll just say actually, there's one other piece I should say before. So that was the practice we just did, the practice of seeing the good and feeling the good in ourselves. I put instructions on the sheet as well for doing the same practice with regard to other people, which is very, very important. We already had a whole discussion here about if that's really possible, someone's really bad and so on. I'll leave it to you to draw your own conclusions if you try the practice. What I'll say very, very importantly is, when you try this practice with other people, don't try it with the hardest person in the world right away. That's not how these things work. That's like, as I say, sometimes going to the gym and trying to pick up the heaviest weight in the gym without doing any other training. So start with something very doable, something very much within your muscle of emotional strength and your psychological strength and your spiritual strength. And then we'll see from there if you can gradually build it up. That's the way these practices work. So I hope that's helpful for people. What we're going to see now is another angle, another perspective on teshuva, which very much is going to strengthen, complement what we saw already. This idea in the first source in the Talmud, the ancient rabbis, is that teshuva has actually been here from before our world existed. And we're going to see what that means in terms of our experience of it. So it says here in the Talmud, in the tractate, a section of the Talmud called Pesachim. It's mostly about Pesach, Passover. It was taught in a Tannaitic source. So the Tanaim are the early rabbis of the Mishnah. So the rabbis who are teaching us things roughly between the years 0 and 200 CE. So those rabbis said 7 things were created before the world was created, and they are Torah, Teshuvah, the Garden of Eden, Gehinnom, that's like a kind of Jewish version of purgatory. Sometimes people call it hell, but it's not really that. The throne of glory, the temple, and the name of the Messiah. So we could have a whole class about each of these, obviously, and I'm sure some of you have questions about Gehinnom and the throne of glory and the Garden of Eden. I apologize. We are not here for that. We do not have time for that. That is another class for another time. We are here, obviously, to talk about Teshuvah, being as it's the central work of the month of Elul. And what does it mean? Just to ponder this for a second ourselves before we go on and see what other people said about it. What does it mean to me, to you right now, to each of us, that this thing called Teshuvah, this possibility of returning to our higher best self, our divine source, Teshuvah was created before the world was created? Just sit with that for a second. And we'll see what the rabbis say. But I really hope everyone at least began to ask the question for yourselves. So it says here in another very early rabbinic source, Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, Teshuvah and good deeds are like a shield against punishment. That's a quote from the Mishnah, from an early rabbinic text. And then Rabbi Yishmael says, if Teshuvah had not been created, the world would not stand. So what I take from these two sources together in the worldview of the ancient rabbis, Teshuvah is an essential precondition for our universe to exist, right? There is no universe, no Milky Way, no other galaxies, no nothing, no, certainly no human condition without this thing first existing. And so, I might compare it therefore to the laws of thermodynamics or gravity, right? It's just an essential law that has to exist in order for us to be here, for anything to be here. The possibility of return. And we'll see what this means for the rabbis about the human condition in this other source. And this is already a nice little set that go together. This quote from Genesis, from Bereshit, chapter 2, where humanity is being created for the second time. It's described twice. So Hashem, God, the eternal God, formed Adam from the earth. And that's the verse from Genesis chapter 2. And then the rabbis say, Rabbi Berachia and Rabbi Chilbo said in the name of Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman, they said, he, Adam, the first human being, he was created from the place of his atonement. As it says, make me an altar of earth. So how is Adam made in chapter 2 of Genesis? He's made by a combination of earth, and actually earth with water, the rabbis add, earth and water, and then the divine breath is blown into that mud, that dust of the earth. And so we get, from this combination of earth and the divine breath, we get the human being. So what we're being told here is that the dust and the mud, the earth that we're made of, Adama is earth and Adam is human being. So human from humus, from earth. We're really an earthling. The earthling, Adam, is made from actually not just any old mud and dust, but actually the earth of the altar that eventually becomes the altar in the temple, which is the place of atonement, the place where we go to say, we messed up, we did wrong, we made a mistake, and we want to fix it. And it carries on the source. It says, God says, the Blessed Holy One said, look, I'm making Adam from the place of his atonement, and hopefully he will endure. Meaning, I'm doing this and making him from the very matter of the process of teshuvah, of atonement, of making it good, of fixing mistakes, in the hope that this means he'll actually survive. And because I think what I take from the source is the suggestion that we're so obviously going to get things wrong that God felt the need to build into us physically. I mean, we read it as metaphorically as you want, but the source is claiming that physically built into us is the actual substance of atonement, the actual substance of forgiveness. That's really what the altar is about. We have Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It's really the central energy and work of the day, as we'll learn together when we get to it in the calendar, is about forgiveness. So we are literally made from the altar of atonement and forgiveness. That's our physical makeup according to the rabbis. That's how they see us. We can carry on with this idea, a few more sources, and then as before, we'll come back together and discuss and share. Then we'll practice. So this is the Zohar, a central work of Kabbalah. This is when what academics consider to be Kabbalah is really beginning around the time of the Zohar, and the Zohar is right at the core of it. And the Zohar makes this very strong claim about Teshuvah. It says, Teshuvah restores everything, repairing above, repairing below, mending oneself, mending the whole world. I'll read that again. I think it's important. Teshuvah restores everything, repairing above, repairing below, mending oneself, mending the whole world. So this refers to our ripples. I mentioned before, if we do this work of trying to see the good in other people, we send out these ripples that we actually can't imagine or control where they're going to go. And again, if I drop a specific glass on a specific floor, I might not be able to put that specific glass together. But there's a claim here that the fixing, the repairing that I can do with teshuvah ultimately encompasses everything it needs to encompass. Ultimately encompasses everything. We might not experience it in this moment, or maybe even not in this lifetime, right? Kabbalah includes a belief in reincarnation, right? Which, I'm not, insisting anyone has to accept, but just that's part of the worldview here. So it might not all be okay immediately. And it might not all be okay, as I say, even in our lifetime. But the claim is the work we do has repercussions, it has implications, it has these ripples that don't stop. They just keep going. They just keep going and going and going when we do the work. One more source along these lines, this time from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He's responsible for so much of what we will study together. It's from the Hasidic movement, because the Hasidic movement is really about bringing the teachings of Kabbalah into what we call today psychology, into our lived experience of what's going on inside us. So he says, Baal Shem Tov, he says, this is a great principle. Everything in the world contains the holy sparks of the divine. Nothing is empty of the sparks, not even trees or stones, nor human behavior. Even the wrongdoings that people do have these sparks of the cosmic breaking in them. So he's referring to a story the Kabbalists tell of creation, of how the world was creation, where God pours love into the world, pours light and energy and life into the world, and there are vessels which cannot hold or don't know how to hold and share this divine energy in a way that works. So the vessels shatter, and the whole universe from that point, as he says here, is made up of these holy sparks, which are often hidden or concealed by shells or husks. Because we have a universe where there's so much light and divinity in everything, but there's also a vessel around it. There's also something that we have to learn how to work with to access the light and the love. So that's the Kabbalistic worldview. And he's saying these sparks are there, even in the stuff that we do wrong, even our wrongdoings, mistakes, even the things we wish we hadn't done. The Hebrew word here he's using out is actually aveira, which literally means a transgression, something that we crossed a boundary we should not have crossed. Nonetheless, even in that crossing a boundary we shouldn't have crossed, there's a spark of the divine. There's something good. And carrying on, he says, and what are the sparks from the breaking? They are teshuvah. When a person makes teshuvah for a wrongdoing, they elevate the sparks that were in that action to the higher world. Hence, the verse which describes divine forgiveness says, bearing sin, i.e. lifting the sin upwards. This is a play on words the Baal Shem Tov makes. When God says in the Torah, I'm God, I'm merciful, I'm compassionate, I bear your sin, the kind of literal meaning of it seems to be that God is saying, I carry your sin, meaning I bear the weight of your wrongdoing. Like I, God, will hold the wrongdoing you did, and I'll help bear the weight of it. But the Kabbalistic reading here from the Baal Shem Tov is he's saying, actually, there's also another connotation, another way of reading it, which is our sin is lifted up by the divine spark within it. And what is the divine spark within it? He says, it's teshuvah. It's our possibility, our potential for return. That we, even when we did the thing that was wrong, he's saying the spark within it is that good intention, that thing that drove us to do it, that was actually trying to do something good that we misdirected in some way. And something I find a very helpful model in thinking about this. Some of you are familiar maybe with nonviolent communication. Some of you I know are. Nonviolent communication says people are all just trying to meet our needs. And sometimes people are not aware enough of exactly what our needs are and what is the most skillful way to meet them. But everything we do is trying to meet some need. And if we're not so conscious and aware of what our need is and what the most skillful way to achieve it is, then we're very likely to do something we regret. But that doesn't mean what we did was inherently bad or evil. It just means that divine spark needs to be redirected, which, by the way, is a great way of understanding teshuvah as well, because it means returning, right? Returning also, like readjusting, realigning that spark within ourselves. And there's a complementary teaching here from a student of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polnoy. He says here, my master, the Baal Shem Tov, so he's talking about his teacher who we just saw a teaching from, the Baal Shem Tov, the best, made a spiritual ascent and saw how the angel Michael, one of the archangels, the angel Michael, the great guardian of Israel, was advocating for Israel, saying that all of their debts are really merits. So the Baal Shem Tov had this vision or the spiritual experience where he saw what happened in heaven. That's the claim, again, not kind of insisting anyone has to take it literally, but he saw that this angel, Archangel Michael, who's known as the great guardian and defender of us, is saying all of the things that our people do wrong, all of the mistakes we make, all of the spiritual debt we have, is that actually a merit? Because our motivation is just to meet our needs, is just to serve life. We just, all get misdirected and caught up in how hard it is to be a human being and how confusing so many things are. So things get out of whack. But actually, our innermost desire is actually good, and hence all of our debt is really merit. I'll see just a little bit more in this section, and then we'll come back together and talk about. There's plenty to talk about. I think this is the last source there. It is good. Like, this is from Rav Kook, who's a very important teacher us on this subject. Rav Kook, 20th century mystic. One half of his family was Hasidic. The other half came from the Misnagdim, the Lithuanian school who were opposed to Hasidut. He combined and synthesized these two approaches in himself. And he wrote a very, very beautiful and deep and important, really classic work called The Lights of Teshuvah, or Orot Teshuvah, all about Teshuvah. It's very poetic, very, very deep and beautiful. And this is one of the teachings from that book, which really relates to this particular section. We'll see more from him is later on the sheet. So he says, Teshuvah always resides in the heart. Remember, we saw before the Baal Shem Tov says it was present in everything that exists. And before that, we saw the rabbis who said it existed even before the universe existed, right? But he's saying specifically it's always in our heart, in our consciousness, we might say. Even at the time of the sin itself, Teshuvah is enveloped in the soul, and it sends its rays of hope that reveal themselves afterwards when regret, the Kul Teshuvah, arrives. So I'm just going to say that in very plain English because his language is very poetic. Even when I'm making a mistake, there's a ray of light, of hope for a better future that is being shown out, that is shining out. And that manifests itself later when I realize what I did wrong and I regret it and I begin to actually fix it. But that regret and that fixing, the teshuvah, doesn't begin after. It's there even when I make the mistake. There's something there even when I make the mistake that actually is already inherent in the mistake, that is the teshuvah itself. Carrying on, he says, Teshuvah resides in the depths of existence because it preceded the world, as we saw in that rabbinic source from the Talmud. Before the sin comes, Teshuvah is already prepared. Therefore, there is nothing as certain in the world as Teshuvah, and in the end, everything will return to its perfected state. This is very important in Rav Kook's view of Teshuvah and our mystics in general. It's not a question of if, it's just a question of when, and will we merit to be the vessels through which it happens, right? It is an inevitability, is the claim. The nature of the Ein Sof, the infinite loving creator, is such that the universe is bound to return to its divine source and divine goodness and its perfected state. The only question is, what role will each of us play in each moment? Like, will we get our egos out of the way, get our personas out of the way, and align ourselves to be instruments for that process? Okay, we're going to come back together, and we just went through so much. I want to do a brief recap, and then I want to hear people's questions and comments on it. So the Talmud, Teshuvah was created before the world. Rabbi Yishmael, if Teshuvah had not been created, the world would not stand. Genesis Rabbah, ancient Midrash, God saying, I am making humanity from the altar of atonement and forgiveness. We're made physically of that stuff. The Zohar, Teshuvah restores everything above, below, ourselves, the universe. It's these ripples that go out in every direction. The Baal Shem Tov, even our mistakes have Teshuvah in them, and our sin is lifted up by the Teshuvah that is inherent in it, the spark of Teshuvah that is in it. Everything has that divine spark in it. The Toldos Yaakov Yosef, the student of the Baal Shem Tov, who says that his teacher had this vision in which Michael, the angel, is saying that all of our debts are really merits, even our mistakes are really merits. And finally, Rav Kook saying Teshuvah is always there, and even at the time of the mistake, it's sending out these rays of hope that reveal themselves later, and that Teshuvah is inevitable. Nothing is as certain as Teshuvah. That's the way the universe was created. Okay, let's come back together and see people's questions and insights on that little family of ideas. Lynn, I see your hand is raised. Please share with us. Wait, Lynn, you're muted though. I'll ask you.
Yes, I have a
Oh,
question.
hi.
Hi. Okay, so
when everything is perfected, when that's supposed to happen, and does that mean we will be okay? Before the apple and all of that, we were one with God.
Mhm.
Then that happened and we were separate. So we were aware of ourselves and each other, but not one with God. So when the perfection happens, will we know that, will we be back with one and will we know it? Or will we be so united that we don't know it?
Oh, what a great question. So
Kind of a weird question, I know.
no, not weird, not weird. Actually, enormously important question. The rabbis talk about this a lot. So my understanding of the rabbinic sources is that they say there'll be a unity that is just as united as the initial unity before the Garden of Eden, or in the Garden of Eden before the apple was eaten, or whatever it was that was eaten.
Whatever.
But they say that all of the work that we've done and the individuation, the individual identities that we have worked on to mature and carry with us will still be there in some form. Now, exactly what that looks like, of course, I don't think any of us can say, precisely, but I think what they're saying is the work that we do matters and is honored, and the people that we make ourselves into matters and is honored. And it's not just the goal is not simply to forget everything and be in a kind of oneness that is
Like a trance or whatever.
right, like a trance, or like that is not but there's no distinction between anything and anyone.
Right.
It's a oneness that actually includes every detail of creation in that oneness. That's by the way, when we say shalom and shlemut, peace and wholeness, these words we use a lot to talk about this vision, that's the connotation of that word. It's a oneness that includes every detail. It's not a oneness of bland uniformity.
Thank you, finally.
You're so welcome. You're so very welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Lynn. I'm gonna call first upon people who have not already had time in the sessions. I really want to maximize the voices that we hear from. So Michael, please share what you would like to.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I'm a newbie to your teaching and I'm enjoying it very much. Thank you. So I've got two, I don't know, maybe somewhat whimsical comments to make. One was about from the Toldo Yaakov Yosef about debts are really merits. It just reminded me of Parshat Balak and Balaam's curses that kept coming out as praise. It seems like that's sort of a hint that this is what happens. That no matter what the curses are, that eventually it's going to come out as praise. The other thing was this morning I read a bit of news about how there are these plasma trails between distant groups of stars that had never previously been demonstrated. So it creates this image of this network of a connected universe by that it's not just this empty void. That there are actually these trails connecting everything everywhere in every direction, which I thought was a wonderful sensation, so I'm associating that to this notion of teshuvah as being a structural element in the cosmos. It's all of these paths that lead us back to connectivity, and then finally, what is that structure? This is my final bit of whimsy, which is we could call it the temple. It doesn't have to be a brick and mortar temple. But all this work of repair that we're doing, maybe that's what it ends up being. It ends up being that's our temple. That's what we end up with.
Oh man, Michael, thank you so much for those 3 points. Yes to your first point, and yes to the other two as well. The Kabbalists essentially see the world, the universe, as a conscious entity, like made up of consciousness. And as you said, therefore, everything is participating in this return. And Sefer Yetzirah actually describes the universe, the cosmos, as a temple that we are helping to restore in that way. So yeah, you're exactly aligned with our mystics when you say that. Thank you. Lane, please.
Hi. The one thing that's really, that I'm taking away from a lot of these teachings is this, something I've been actually writing about, is the importance of free will in all this. Tshuva comes, we have a choice. We don't have to do it, but we're given a choice to do it, in order to better ourselves, better the world, better our relationship with Hashem. But there's this incredible sense of choice given to us to perform teshuvah or not.
Lane, thank you for that. It's so important. So I mentioned before Maimonides and his Laws of Teshuvah, which is a really classic work on the subject. He spends a lot of time there talking about free will and really emphasizes, that's the root and the core and the foundation of Judaism in general. He says, and many of our rabbis say, if we don't really believe we really have the freedom to choose, none of it makes any sense at all. Like, why does the Torah, ask us to do some things and not others, and to be in a relationship with life through that? So it's tremendously important what you're saying. And also Rav Kook talks a lot in his work on Teshuvah about Ratzon, which is our will or our desire, and talks a lot about how really the work of Teshuvah is to find what it is that we really want and to align ourselves with it. So yeah, that's a very powerful lens for doing this work. I'll share one more teaching about it. There's so much I had to cut off the sheet, and this was one of them. So we know, some of us know that the days of awe is what we call Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, in that period of the New Year festivals. The days of awe, but they have another name in rabbinic literature. They're also called Yemei Ratzon, which can be translated as the days of will or desire. And it's like the other side of the days of awe. Like, it's the same period. It's just another name for the same days. The mystics say, Rabbi Nachman, his student says, Rabbi Nosson of Breslov, he says that we're supposed to focus on our will at this time. We're supposed to work out essentially what it is we really want, which, if you think about it, is such a great way to enter the new year, right? Like, what do I actually really want? I spend so much of my time doing things because I accepted upon myself that it was important, but the work of really refining that and realigning with my will as it is now, that's a great lens for seeing all of this work of Teshuvah. So yeah, thank you for raising that up for us. That's very important. Sarah, please.
Well, just what you just said makes me think that indeed having free will itself is awesome. That we are granted that opportunity. But my question was, after reading this Rav Kook piece, it is, so the law of thermodynamics then, that says that, there is entropy, that everything kind of falls apart or just goes to almost nothingness, makes me think that this chaos indeed is the teshuvah, and that indeed they are indeed equivalent. Are we returning to perfection in entropy?
Wow. I love that, Sarah. I thought you were going to say that they're like opposing forces, which is one way of seeing it, right? But no, maybe it's the same thing. I do not know, but I love that. I love that suggestion and that possibility. I really hadn't thought of it that way before. Maybe that's what it means. I mentioned before what our mystics say about how the oneness that will be eventually will be a oneness that includes all the details. Maybe that's what you're describing. I don't know, and I look forward to finding out with all of you. Thank you. That was beautiful. So let's hear also. So we have Michelle and Richard, Tova and Talian, and I'll just ask everyone who's sharing to be conscious of being brief and allowing space for others, and then we'll move to the practice. So Michelle and Richard, please. Wait, you may have frozen. Okay, we'll move to Tova. We'll come back to Michelle and Richard. Tova, please.
Do we have an obligation? Do the Kabbalists believe we have an obligation to do teshuvah to sustain the universe?
Oh, very good question. I would say yes. I would say, it's a clear mitzvah according to, the medieval rabbis who said, here is a list of 613 mitzvot. It's either counted as one of those mitzvot, one of the commandments, or connections, or it's seen as so fundamental that it underlies all of the other mitzvot. And the Kabbalists, exactly like Rabbi Ishmael said in that source we saw, see it as necessary for the world to continue. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because without it, it's, you know, a different kind of chaos, not the good kind of chaos. Thank you, Tova. Italian, please. Please unmute. Yeah.
I wanted to share the Return Again song because I think it's on this so appropriate on this teaching. But if you want me to save it towards the end, I would, whatever. What do you?
Or please, could you put a link in the chat? That would be perfect. And then, you know, and also we have a WhatsApp group set up from last year's cohort, which we're just going to change the
So
name.
just sing it on that group. Save it for that.
Thank you.
Okay, I will do that.
Thanks, Talian. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone who's sharing. And also, I know that there's a lot going on in the chat. I'm sorry I'm not able to also read the chat and also be present on the screen with all of you. So anyone who wants to also share things on the WhatsApp group after is welcome to. It's a great way we can keep learning from each other. So the practice we're going to do now. Oh, wait, I see one more hand. Wait, Anne, please.
I think it's a question, which is, so I'm hearing that there's an obligation for teshuvah and there's also a choice. So somewhere you're holding that in tension or together. Yes? I mean,
Yes. Yeah. No, this good. Yeah, this is worth exploring, and this is really important. So what do we mean when we say something's an obligation? It doesn't mean necessarily that it's easy or that I do it automatically, right? But the rabbis are trying to tell us, I think, in their language, that we must prioritize it. We need to prioritize it. But I think they also recognize from the way they talk about it how it might be the hardest thing about being a human being, to really make teshuvah, like to really look at ourselves in the mirror and really fix what's there. I think, you know, they understand it. It's very difficult. So yes, we're obligated in rabbinic language, but also it's up to us how much we really seriously, sincerely engage with it, right? We could pay lip service to it very easily, but like, you know, it's not so simple. Is that helpful? Great. Okay, let's move to the practice. It's again a meditative practice, and this one is called appreciating the spark of teshuvah in our mistakes. So it's again, like all the practices we'll do, it's really taking the teachings that we just saw together and trying to bring them into our embodied experience, trying to really feel them in our bodies. So again, we'll meditate for about 5 to 10 minutes. So please make yourselves comfortable, whatever posture is good for you. And if you want to turn your camera off, leave it on, whatever's good for you. And let's make ourselves relax. If you want to raise up the shoulders again, drop them, take some deep breaths, yawn, sigh. Whatever your body needs. Let's bring our attention inside ourselves when you're ready. And as before, let's see if we can be friendly and welcoming, compassionate to whatever we're noticing is going on within. Could be physical sensations, emotions, or thoughts, or whatever else. And let's find our safe home base, the anchor that we used before for the previous exercise, if that worked for us. Again, a safe place in your body, or a mantra or visualization, something you can focus on that's safe for you. See what happens there moment by moment. So we try and keep our attention with it. Our attention wanders. When it wanders, just bring it back with kindness, with diligence, to the object we've chosen, to our safe anchor. And I'm going to ask you to think about something that you've done that you regret. And please, because we only have a few minutes to do this practice, please start with something very small and very manageable, not your biggest regret, not some very, very painful thing. It's like what I said earlier in the session about going to the gym and picking up the heaviest weight. We can build up to that if we do this practice a lot. For now, let's choose something very small and manageable that we regret doing. And let's bring ourselves back there as much as we can to really experience what happened. See if we can feel with as many of our senses as possible our inner experience. And see if we can hold with compassion all the different emotions and thoughts that might come up. We imagine ourselves back in that moment, back in that situation, doing that thing, whatever it was we later regretted. See if we can let go of judgment. Just really feel compassion for ourselves. And now we're going to see, we're going to inquire, we're going to ask, was there a spark of teshuvah present, even while we were doing the thing? And this may take the form of this beautiful ray of hope and light that Rav Kook describes, and later could manifest as our regret, maybe a pang of conscience, some part of us that knew, some consciousness that knew that maybe this wasn't the best thing to do, an inner voice or a feeling, a sensation. Was there maybe a good intention, a spark of good intention, trying to meet a positive need, but that we later realized maybe wasn't being directed in the best possible way? See if we can find that spark, good intention of teshuvah, of wanting good for ourselves and others, wanting what's best for life. There may be so many contradictory thoughts and feelings, so many different desires and pulls. So we build, as we did on the first exercise, we build by focusing on our goodness, focusing on our good intentions, on the parts of us which wanted to do the right thing, even if we weren't sure what it was. We focus on that goodness. And let's introduce the idea that this goodness, this teshuvah, this spark of teshuvah, existed before our world, before our universe. There's something inevitable about it. It actually holds our reality. All of reality is inevitably destined to return into teshuvah, to its best possible state, its perfected state. Notice what's happening as we try to appreciate that goodness, that teshuvah, even within ourselves at that moment, in that situation. And we doing this thing that we later regret, even there. Can we feel and appreciate that spark? And perhaps as we do this work, focusing on that goodness that was there, even at that moment, perhaps we can let go of some of our layers of self-criticism, self-blame, guilt, shame. Really let ourselves feel how wondrously good we are, even when we're getting it wrong. Let's slowly bring this round of practice to a close. Take your time. Come back together gradually. Feel free to move, stretch, breathe, whatever way your body wants to. Yeah, we can take a few minutes to hear from folks, especially if there are folks who haven't shared yet today who would like to share anything that came up for you from that practice and the sources it was based on. Jill, shalom.
Shalom. It was just a quick thought that if we don't mess up, then we don't, the teshuva remains concealed.
And actually, by occasionally messing up, we reveal that potential that otherwise would be concealed. Is that correct?
That is very beautifully put. And yeah, that is exactly correct. That's how the Kabbalists explain the whole story of the Garden of Eden. And even before that, the story I mentioned before, that when God made the universe, there had to be a breaking of the vessels. The Kabbalists say, yeah, that there's something about breaking and repairing that is better than if it had just remained pristine. And there's a passage in the Talmud related to this. It's very important. Again, I don't think it made the sheet. Things had to be cut. But it says in the Talmud that somebody who is perfectly righteous and somebody who is a Baal Teshuvah, somebody who is working on Teshuvah, who is a master of Teshuvah in the sense of they live Teshuvah. We have these two people. The Talmud says that the Baal Teshuvah, the person of Teshuvah, can stand where the perfectly righteous person cannot stand. And be really, I mean, as we talked about earlier, nobody is perfectly righteous in the sense they never mess up. That's a fiction. Yeah, it's not the human condition. And we know from the Torah that even our greatest leaders and prophets all did things which are clearly labeled as mistakes, and they have to make teshuvah. But even if someone hypothetically, theoretically, could be perfectly righteous, they wouldn't be able to stand where somebody who's making teshuvah is, because, as you said, Jill, there's something about the process of breaking and repairing that's actually better. That's how we understand it. Thank you. Annalise, please.
Maybe small, but when we go inside, all the times they're coming all those thoughts. I did do that wrong, or I did that wrong, I did that wrong. And then I love it that you say, go with compassion, feel the compassion. That's such a, for me, that's a great practice. Yeah, that you just see everything, but you feel compassion for it at the same time. So thank you. Yeah.
You're so welcome. It's very important, and I'm not just making it up from my own experience. The Kabbalists say that our central act of tikkun, of repair, is to find the rachamim, the compassion in everything, and so to find that even severity, challenge, hardship, judgment, stuff that we all have all the time, is to find compassion even there. And to they say, that's the ultimate unification that we're trying to make, is to bring rachamim, to become, again, compassion to all of existence. And they say we're doing every mitzvah, every good deed, for the sake of unifying rachamim and malchut, or Hakadosh Baruch Hu and Shekhinah. They talk about it in different ways, but it's what it means to bring compassion to all of existence. So that's our work. That's Kabbalah. That's what we're trying to do. And teshuvah is like a particular way of like adding urgency to that and understanding. This is the work, but teshuvah is really another way of saying that work we do all the time. We're meant to be making teshuvah all the time. It's just this is the season for remembering, reminding. Thank you. Ariella, please.
And that unification is also the kavanah before that we study. That we're always saying unify Yud Hey and Vav Hey.
Beautiful. That's right. May that be something that comes out of our study together. Exactly. That's the goal of everything we're doing. Thank you, Ariella.
Thank you.
Suzanne, please.
Yeah, it was just occurring to me, the very first thing we read today about Elul being the year and the left hand of the soul, male and female, and you're like, I don't really know what that's about. We're not going to really talk about that. But currently, it makes me, when you said that another way of talking about the days of awe is the Yamim Ratzon, and I think Yamim also means right and can mean right hand. So we're talking about this will, doing, teshuva, but bringing the compassion. So we've got the left and the right together.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful drush. It's not exactly the same word, Suzanne, but you're close enough that the rabbis would have made the same drush themselves. That's the truth. We have many, many rabbinic teachings where they would make, there's one letter difference between yamin and yamim, but they would have very much made that play. So I'll accept that as a very beautiful modern midrash. Thank you. That's very beautiful. And let's hear from Kathy, and then we'll move forward. We have 10 minutes left, and I want to give a little guided summary of the work that is for each of us to carry on with as we go forward. Kathy, please.
Yes, thank you. I was thinking how much in Teshuva intention is so important because you know, when we're thinking of our mistakes, we still could hold that intention in the right place. And so that's always behind most of our actions is actually good intention. And that really sweetens the moment when we might be dwelling on our mistakes. I also thought in this class we were talking about prayer and singular versus plural. And, you know, in Judaism, that's always, of course, we pray in community. And yet the singular, which we're doing so much here, you know, this singular meditation, even though we're in community here, we're in our community. And so there's a certain tension there, and I don't know, I think there's just a lot to say about it. We don't have time now, but I don't know if that comes up later in our teachings, but that would be an interesting discussion.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I really like the first point you made, first of all, about intention. I think there's something Rav Kook is trying to say in that teaching and others where he says, our intention essentially is always good. The question is, how do we do the work of translating that into good action in the world? Like that's the work of Teshuvah, which, by the way, we're like going all the way back to Sefer Yetzirah at the beginning of the sheet. When Sefer Yetzirah says, the thing to focus on this month is ma'aseh, action or doing, there's also a similar assumption there. Our will, our intention, our desire, deep down, our real desire is good, but how do we manifest that in actual action? And in terms of, you know, what you said about the individual and community, I mean, I really feel when we're doing this work, the more I do it for myself and the more each of you do it for yourselves, the more it strengthens all of us and rippling outwards from that. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov says. He says the individual redemption, he calls it, has to come first, and then there can be a collective redemption. Because the collective redemption depends on us being awake and being aligned in the best possible way. So may it be so that the work we're doing is doing that. That's a good segue to talk about how this continues. So first of all, I know some of you are already fully registered, some of you are yet to decide. I'm going to talk as if we're, all doing the course continuing, and if that's you, then great. First of all, if you would like a study partner, a chevrita or a chabura, a small group, then please email me and let me know what your time zone is and what your time commitment level is. Like if you want to allocate a certain number of hours per week or per month to learning with one other person or in a small group, just let me know that, and I will do my best to pair people up depending on where you are and what you want to do in terms of time. And you'll see on the sheet there's a lot more material. So I want to give a quick guided tour, as I said, through what's on the sheet, so at least you have a lay of the land. And then what I hope it will happen is those of us going through the whole journey together, we will use the WhatsApp group to keep in touch about it. So people will say, I got to section 3 and there's this source, I don't understand it, or I got to section 4 and I think I understand it, or whatever it is, or did anyone else, do the practice and find this happen? And I'm going to be on that WhatsApp group along with everyone else all the time responding. So the idea is that we can really do the journey together as we keep going through the month. So here, I'll share my screen and see what is left. So section 3, making it right. This is a really practical section. So a few teachings about making teshuva with the different parts of our bodies and how actually this really relates to what we just said about intention and action. from Rav Kook about we have to turn the good intention into actual action. Something else from Rav Kook all about repair, tikkun. Really, this section is really a pep talk on like, you can do it, on saying, you know, you can repair, you can fix what you need to. And then the practice here is very, very long in terms of, you know, writing on the page, but it's quite simple to say. It's what we call a spiritual accounting, a cheshbon nefesh, which means we go through the previous year and we write down what happened and what we did, what we want to celebrate, what we're grateful for, the amazing things we did and that we took part in, that we're really happy about, but also the challenging things and the things we want to work on. So it's a long text, as I said, but the idea is that the cheshbon nefesh, kind of like doing your bookkeeping, but spiritually, it tells you, you know, where you're in credit and where you're in debt, and you know, who do you owe money to? In this case, it might not be money you owe. Who do you have to phone to fix a relationship, or you know, what aspect of your life you need to focus more on, etc., etc. So that's something. The instructions, like I say, are very long. I don't expect people to follow instructions literally, but I hope they'll be a helpful guide, and of course, you'll adapt them for yourselves. Section 4 is really about something, attention, that I'm very happy came up already in this class, which is the balance between saying yes, we need to change and improve, and also not getting caught up in a toxic kind of blame and a toxic kind of making ourselves feel bad, a toxic kind of criticism, self-criticism. So these are sources which talk about how the universal human condition is to be imperfect. And it's okay that we're imperfect. This is the way God made us. And this is, you know, just to highlight this source, it's at the bottom of page 14, goes on to page 15, from an ancient Midrash Tanchuma. This is a source where the ancient rabbis tell us that actually the fact that we are imperfect and the fact we do imperfect things is how God made the world, and that's okay. And there's humor in this source, and there's compassion in this source, and they compare it to a situation where there's a married couple. It's very beautiful and profound. So that's very important to bear in mind, that we don't want to slip into that negative kind of self-criticism, that doesn't help us or anyone else. There is a place, of course, for, you know, wanting to change, but that it has to be done in a healthy way. And similarly, here, Hasidic teaching from the Moranayim, the early Hasidic Rebbe, saying teshuvah is a mitzvah, a positive mitzvah, a commandment or connection from the Torah. Therefore, we need to perform it with joy. Now, we haven't talked about joy so much explicitly, but it's related to this whole point about compassion, that it's not meant to be a miserable process. We're meant to feel good about doing this process, and that fits with this very important teaching from Rav Kook, where he says here, Teshuvah must always be based on improving the future. I want to spend a minute on this. It's very, very important, because it's not just about fixing the past because I feel bad about what happened. It's about, who am I going to be? Who am I trying to be? And if we let that be one of our North Stars, as it were, one of the things we're navigating by, then it can be very, very helpful for us. That can help us find out, where am I returning to? Who is the higher self, the better self that I want to be? That's fixing the future. So that's very, very important from Rav Kook. And there's two more things here from Rav Kook along similar lines. And then there's a practice about looking at our behavior and things that we've done, and looking at what the process of teshuvah has been like for us in the past, and trying to find a place to celebrate that process in our lives, like a place where we've grown and made teshuvah. Can we have joy about the transformation that's happened there? Can we celebrate and give ourselves positive encouragement based on what we've already achieved? And finally, the last section is it actually begins with the quote about "I am for my beloved is for me," that I mentioned at the beginning of the session from Song of Songs, and it's about the balance that we need for teshuvah between love or compassion and determination, grit, perseverance. We need both, and these sources are all again designed to encourage us. And the questions here are all practices in their own right. The questions here are before each set of sources. There are questions about, what is our own experience of this aspect of teshuvah, and how can we help ourselves and support ourselves doing this work? So let's come back together. Thank you, everyone, so much. I'm very, very excited. We began the journey so well. I very, very much appreciate everyone who shared, and everyone who was just present and here with us in your own way. You were sharing your presence and your consciousness. And if you have questions, just email me. I'm very, very happy to hear. And really look forward to continuing the work, as I said, throughout the month on the WhatsApp group. I hope we'll be in lively discussion about going through this process together. And I look forward to it very, very much. Thank you. Sending everyone blessings.
Good,
Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much.
Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
May we get good news this week.
Todoraba.